My name is Kevin Connors. I'm with the North Dakota Industrial Commission's Oil and Gas Division.
Thanks for joining us today, and we're going to talk a little bit about some carbon capturing. Now, the first thing that came to my mind was coal, so I thought I'd give Mr. Connors a call here to find out exactly if it's coal, oil, gas, etc. I kind of skimmed the press release, I'll be honest with you, so maybe if we could just have a little bit of a set the table a little bit on what you've been working on and kind of the history behind where we got today. How's that sound for you?
Yeah, that sounds great. I appreciate the opportunity. So what I've been working on is working with the Federal Environmental Protection Agency to get North Dakota the regulatory authority to regulate carbon dioxide storage in the deep subsurface in the earth.
Explain that a little further. I mean, you're talking about storage down in the earth. I mean, I'm thinking of like aquifers, but, carbon furs, if you will. How exactly are we storing that carbon down in the earth?
Yeah, so, the program, the regulatory program we've developed is premised on protecting our underground sources of drinking water. And so there's all sorts of safeguards in place to make sure that carbon dioxide is injected in a manner that does not contaminate any freshwater resources and actually protects them. And we're typically looking for an ideal sandstone formation with rock above and below that will confine the carbon dioxide that's injected into the sandstone for the long term and make sure that it stays down there safely stored. Now,
in the press release, I saw something called Class 6 well activities. Can you explain that a little bit further? What would be a Class 6 well activity for geological storage of carbon dioxide?
Yeah, so the Safe Drinking Water Act has a program called the Underground Injection Control Program, and that program consists of 6 well classes for the purposes of injecting different fluids into the earth in order to get rid of those fluids, or in some cases, to enhance oil recovery in oil and gas fields. And in this case, Class 6 is for the injection of carbon dioxide for the purposes of long-term storage.
So off the top of my head, like I said, the first thing I thought of was coal right away. I know that you guys have been working, or the state has been working on ERC, especially coal technologies that involve carbon. Of course, oil and gas has as well. Is this basically creating a carbon market, a carbon industry, if you will, in the state of North Dakota? Talk to me a little bit about what this is going to ripple into.
That's a good question. What happened yesterday with Administrator Pruitt's signature really gave North Dakota a key piece to a bigger picture or a bigger puzzle. Now we have the regulatory authority. We give industry, the coal, the lignite coal industry, the oil and gas industry, and even the ethanol production industry, the regulatory certainty it needs to develop carbon capture and storage projects. And so really that's what we're looking at in terms of North Dakota is really positioned to be a leader in carbon capture and storage, not just with the regulations that are in place, but also with what we have in terms of our geology, our lignite coal supply, that proximity to oil and gas fields, and also our ethanol production, which in addition to coal, the ethanol companies are also looking at carbon capture and storage as well.
Well, and that's where I was going with this, is that in the oil and gas world, you go to a different shale play and you have to use different technology, and it's kind of like the same technology, but it's different, and a lot like coal. There's a lot of baseline technology that's the same, but you start getting other regions, especially in North Dakota, it's a different, end game. It's a different, after you get past the 50, it's a whole different game. And is that what I'm kind of hearing here? Because I mean, at the end of the day, carbon is carbon, but the way to get carbon from ethanol, I would imagine, would be different than the way you get carbon from, say, the oil and gas wells and, say, the carbon. So is there a universal technology that's going to fix this, or I mean, that's going to use this, or does each industry going to kind of represent its own little tweaking of technology and its own little chemistry set? I'm not sure if I made any sense with that question, but are you following me at all with that?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on the capture side of things. I'm more fall under where we're gonna put that carbon dioxide in terms of underground injection. But certainly, I know the ethanol production. There's a pure stream of CO2 that comes off of that, and it's fairly it's less complex, I believe, to capture that CO2 than it would be for more like a coal-fired facility to capture that CO2. And there's a little more complexity there that comes along with that. But, with this regulatory program in place, the reason I keep bringing up regulatory certainty is that's a key component to continuing to develop and advance these new technologies to hopefully get to a point where we're looking at commercial scale, large scale projects.
Yeah, and I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit here, because that was one of the big issues, as you know, for a long time, was that certainty that, let's be honest, there was a lot of science projects happening in North Dakota, and they were funded without certainty. Now, they were funded with uncertainty. So now with a level of certainty, common sense would say that there's going to probably be more science projects or more definitive science that's going to kind of come out of the next, say, 5 years. That's kind of what I'm picturing in my head anyway.
Well, the timing's great, and although we waited, almost 5 years to receive this approval from the EPA, the timing couldn't be much better in terms of where the carbon capture and storage projects and industry are moving towards is really going from that demonstration type projects and more looking at really developing commercial size, large scale injection and storage projects. And so, we really are positioned, and the regulatory program that we have developed in conjunction with meeting the EPA requirements is the first in the nation, the first of its kind. And it's really exciting for all North Dakota, really, to put us in a position to be a leader in this type of industry.
So what put us over the top? As you got in the final stages, was there any certain regulatory paragraph that put us over the top, or any sort of company that stepped up and said, we're going to invest to the technology? Anything at all that they mentioned that we really, or that North Dakota really made sure their I's and T's were crossed?
It was really our congressional delegation. So Senator Hovind and Senator Heitkamp and Congressman Kramer really worked hard from their end in Washington, D.C. to get this approval pushed forward. And that's ultimately what it came down to. I mean, we worked through the application process with EPA back in 2011, submitted the application in 2013, and made some traction in 2014, but then it really just got delayed. And the former EPA administration just didn't approve the application. So it became somewhat of a political push to make sure that we got this primacy.
What's next for the state? What's next for the industry now? We've got this federal grant, this approval. And so from the state's perspective, over the next, say, 3 months, what's your guys' expectation? And then transition that into industry. If somebody wants to know more or get involved in this carbon storage, is there opportunities now?
Well, I would say so. Red Trail Energy is an ethanol production facility in Richardson. They've been looking at doing CO2 storage, and they're really at the forefront of coming along, and we anticipate them submitting a permit application to us in the near future. And in addition to that, the Energy and Environmental Research Center in Grand Forks has been doing a project that's titled Carbon Safe, and they've been working with the coal-fired facility in Center, the Milton R. Young Station, and developing hopefully in the future of capture technology that can be retrofitted on that plant, and then that CO2 would be stored in that area.
So the Red Trail Energy outside of Richardson, they're looking at doing this, huh? I heard some rumblings a few years ago, so they're moving, or at least they're letting people know that they're looking at it, huh? So that we do have some movement already.
Yeah, certainly. And so there's some advantage to the carbon markets in the West Coast where their ethanol is being utilized. And so capturing the CO2 here in North Dakota and storing it underground would be something that could be a viable option for them in terms of the economics of what they do.
Any final thoughts? Anything that we need to mention that we forgot? Anything you feel like we need to reiterate that's ultra important, or anything along those lines? I'll just kind of give the final thought and the floor to you there, sir.
You know, North Dakota has been a leader all along in this, in carbon dioxide capture and storage, and we saw the importance of the state from years ago before really any other states. And so we had statutes that were put in place in 2009, and our state leadership saw that, and they've positioned us to be where we're at today with CO2 storage. So it's an exciting thing where we're at. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of advancing those technologies, but we are in a very good position in North Dakota. And we've always looked at carbon dioxide really as a valuable commodity that can be used in depleted oil and gas reservoirs for enhanced oil recovery. And so, you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to try to find ways to utilize that CO2 to increase our oil production and expand and extend the life of some of our depleted oil reservoirs.